The first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one. My landscape photography sucks. When I first started taking photography more seriously, I thought my favorite genre by far was going to be landscape. I love being out in nature, especially in autumn. The leaves are such gorgeous colors. But every time that I've gotten home, I'm disappointed in how my photos look. Every year I anticipate the brilliant explosion of colors in autumn, and I always rush out with my camera to capture it. And I'm always left a little bit disappointed. I figured since I upgraded to a full-frame Sony a7 IV with its 33 megapixels, my photos would be stunning, but it didn't really work out that way. In hopes of getting better, I did some research by watching landscape photographers on YouTube, and I walked away with a few tips that I hope might help us all. One of the major issues with my landscape photography is that my compositions are a little chaotic. One of the most important tips that I've learned so far is that even with landscape photography, you do need a subject. From watching Simone d'Entremont, I realized that one of the major issues with my landscape photography is that I have too many subjects. There's really no main feature.
In this photo, what's the subject? The lighthouse? The sun popping out from the clouds? The reflecting water? Or this reflection on the rocks? Too many subjects in this one means that it isn't clear where the viewer should look. But in this photo here, I have made it clear where your eye should be drawn. Or in this photo of big waves, none of them are standing out as the main feature. But in this shot here, we know who the main actor is. Or in this photo, make it simple. Sometimes less is more.
I was really confused about this because with portrait photography and wildlife photography, a subject is so obvious. But when you have a gorgeous scene in front of you with multiple trees and a stream, how do you choose what your subject is going to be? But something that Gareth Evans from Park Camera said really helped me with this. He said that your photo needs an anchor point, somewhere for your eye to rest.
What about if there's not an obvious subject? What can you do? Well, there's lots of things that you can do with composition, leading lines to lead you to an area of a photo. This photo, for example, I don't feel it has an obvious subject, but I feel like it's more just the end of this kind of path. And I've actually emphasized that in my editing as well. I've popped a radial filter in Lightroom around the end of the path. I've darkened everything around it. It's almost given a bit of a really full-on vignette around the end of this path, and then I've brightened the end so that is the most kind of obvious part of the photo to look at. It works as the anchor point.
I've always been attracted to the light at the end of a path, and I didn't think that could be a subject, because sometimes it looks a little busy with all the trees around it. But I've learned from watching Park Cameras that you can use a radial gradient and really draw the eye to the end of the path. Even if I've been able to identify a clear subject, sometimes I notice my landscape photography looks a little bit flat. I found out from watching William Patino that you can add depth to your photo by adding some foreground and midground elements, but one thing you need to watch out for is that they're not roadblocks drawing your eye away from the main subject.
So if we have our, background, midground, foreground, all those three layers are there in order to create depth because we have near and far, and then we're going to create flow with these elements. And now we need to create harmony. We want things to move in the direction of that main subject and not away from it. One of the common things I'll say is don't have a roadblock there. We don't want something running horizontally that will now stop the eye from getting to that main focal point. And it's one of the very common problems we can have. We might have a flowing river in the foreground, a waterfall in the background, but then somewhere in that midground area, you've got a big log running from left to right that's cutting through the frame. Boom, we've got a roadblock now. The eye can't effectively transition from the front to the mid to the back.
In this photo, I decided to try to add some foreground, and I really do appreciate the effect that it gives. It definitely does add some depth, I think. I used to think that you needed a wide-angle lens to do proper landscape photography. I would always take around my Sigma 16 to 28 millimeter lens or the 28 to 70, until I watched this video from Sarah Lindsay, and she actually uses her 70-200, and I decided that using a telephoto lens could give me a really different perspective on my landscape photography.
Like, it's beautiful in its vastness. The telephoto lens is definitely the best choice here. I've actually zoomed in now because I really want to focus. Like, I'm still on my 70-200, but I really want to focus on that pop of color on those trees. And I just love how this, like, scene with this lens is turning into the layers are the focus. Another just amazing feat that this lens can do is have my wide angle lens on. This is the 16-35. This is, oh gosh, you guys know I use this lens all the time. I love this lens, but it has its place. And clearly, I mean, just set up in this same composition, like I did not move my tripod or anything. I still had my 70-200 set up like this. But as you can see, it is such a big difference. Like, it basically, with this lens, I do have it at the widest that it can be right now. There's just way too much going on. The sky looks like there's far too much sky, too much grassy foreground, that you really cannot see the star of the show, which is those trees. In my opinion, it is those trees right over there.
Some of the best advice I've gotten is to try to simplify your composition. From watching the Mads Peter Iverson channel, I learned that you don't need to be afraid to zoom in and keep your composition simple.
Use a telephoto zoom to zoom in to the beautiful small scenes. Keep it simple. It can be something like hanging autumn leaves against a lake. It can be autumn leaves on a small bush against a waterfall. It can be identifying and zooming into interesting shapes of tree trunks.
One time I experimented by taking out the Sony 90mm macro lens. I didn't use it as a macro lens, but the 90mm was a really interesting focal length, and I noticed that the colors really seemed to pop since it's a prime lens. I've also learned that color contrast can really add interest to your landscape photography. Since blue and orange are naturally contrasting colors, I've noticed that the orange leaves against the blue sky or a body of water look so amazing. Some of the best advice in finding a good composition actually came from watching expressive photography. I can't get this saying out of my head, and it has helped me so much.
How do you find your compositions? And I spontaneously came up with a little expression, which is point your camera at the cool and then eliminate everything that isn't cool. And that is the message that I want you to take away from this video today, is point your camera at the cool and eliminate everything that isn't cool.
I've been putting his advice into practice, but mostly in post-processing by doing a lot of cropping in Lightroom. I'm hoping that I'll get better in composing right in camera. I was feeling pretty defeated about the state of my landscape photography, but some of these compositional tips have really inspired me to at least keep trying. I really enjoy being out in nature and trying to capture some of the beautiful scenes in front of me, but I realized I really do need to focus in on a subject. It doesn't mean that I can only photograph a single tree. I can definitely use supporting elements, but everything needs to flow to an anchor point. I know it might seem embarrassing to share photos when you're learning a genre of photography that you're not really comfortable with, but I figure we can all learn together from my mistakes, and some of the more advanced photographers out there can give me some feedback. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more photography-related content from a newbie like me. God bless. And of course, when you're just getting into landscape photography, a little rain must fall.